Hello, everybody. So, as I said in the comment here, the guest is running a little late, but I figured I would start a couple minutes before he gets here and test the audio on the various websites. I'm streaming, if this works correctly, on Rumble, on YouTube, and on Odyssey. Rumble already have 8 viewers waiting, so that's pretty exciting. Here's the Zoom link where I'm going to meet him. Our guest today is Richard Weiss. He is the Pennsylvania candidate for Attorney General for the Green Party. I hear that my Rumble audio is working. That is good. Let me go over to YouTube and make sure that's working. YouTube is still waiting. Odyssey is still waiting. I mean, like I said last time, as long as we're live on Rumble, I'll be happy, but I thought I fixed the issue where the streaming software I'm using is supposed to be going to all 3 of these websites, but Rumble is the one I care most about. But yeah, like I said, Richard Weiss is the candidate for the Green Party, and we've been emailing about the topics that we're planning to talk about. Should be pretty interesting. First up, I'm gonna ask him about microplastics. Now, the Green Party is pretty focused on environmental issues, and they've been, for a number of years going back, plastic has been one of the things that they talked about, plastic waste in the oceans, in landfills, and we're recently, or at least I'm recently hearing, or right-wing circles are recently hearing that plastics over time break down and these tiny microplastic particles get into our bloodstream and cause, well, at least the theory is they cause all manner of health concerns, including cancer and all that other fun stuff. So, one of the topics I'm going to talk about with him is microplastics, what we can do about plastic, what we can do to reduce, reuse, recycle, but in the case of plastic, since it's slowly breaking down and giving us cancer, maybe not reuse it. After that, I'm going to ask him about that. We didn't talk too much about the second topic. It's the theory of the pre-axial and the post-axial way of thinking about environmentalism that I talked about in the Princess Mononoke film review. I'm curious his thoughts on that because I haven't spitballed that theory too much with friends yet. I've just talked about it on that video. After that, I'm going to talk about the voter rolls with him. I heard a little bit already about his opinions on that. We do have some disagreements there, but I'll be talking about some of the things with Eagle AI. If you saw my last Pennsylvania news stream this past Wednesday, you'll have an idea what I plan to talk about there. And then, depending how long he wants to stay, depending how long the discussion lasts, how long these topics take, we could talk about the debate, we could talk about his goals for Attorney General, we could talk about the housing crisis. I have a list of other issues that we could get to. So that should be fun. In the meantime, that debate, that was a doozy, wasn't it? Yeah, Biden wasn't at his best. I was surprised that he was that bad, actually. I would have expected at least a little more pep from him, at least a passable amount of energy when we're looking at Biden's debating skills. I was surprised he kept looking down at his podium, too. In my experience, when I've watched him speak, give speeches and stuff, in recent years, up until very, very recently, he's been good at speaking. He's been good at looking at a teleprompter and being coherent with it. He's better at reading off a teleprompter than he is at speaking spontaneously. And I think that's a skill, that's a different part of the brain that's used for that skill, reading out loud from something you're reading that's written down, versus just talking off the cuff. And I think he's retained that skill, and he's practiced it for decades during his career in politics, retained that skill a lot better than his spontaneous speaking skill. And seeing things like his body language during the debate, like how often he looked away, how often he was looking at the podium, it's starting to get concerning. I think his dementia is in later stages for that reason. Like, this is a guy that spent decades and decades and decades public speaking, and he's starting to lose those basic elementary skills of public speaking, like look at the audience, smile, look happy, don't look confused, don't look down at the podium. There wasn't supposed to be notes on the podium, but with the amount of time his eyes spent on that desk in front of him, I'm starting to wonder if he did have some kind of note card there. Still waiting for Richard to show up. Just talking about the debate right now. Until he gets here, I have other topics I'm gonna cover with him. Yeah, more about the debate. The setup, the rules of the debate, with how the moderators were able to mute each candidate when the other one was speaking. Everyone was saying that was gonna hurt Trump during the debate. Everyone was saying it's gonna be like 3 against 1, but I have a theory. I think the moderators got pricked in their pride a little bit by all the people on the right wing saying Trump is going to be debating 3 people at once. They wanted to appear more professional than debates have been in the past. That might have been why they refrained from interfering as much as they did. They stuck to direct questions. Did the candidate answer the question? Yes, no. We can ask a little more. So I think they did a good job with that, much better than I expected. And as far as how the muting rules went, I think it helped Trump to appear more professional, professional is the right word for that. Like, we've seen his other debates with Hillary in 2016. Those were a lot more wild, a lot more off the cuff, a lot more, interrupting each other. He walked around on stage during that one debate and tried to use the physical location on stage as a way to throw her off her debate game, maybe. And comparing that to this, Trump looks a lot more calm and collected, I'll say. And I think that did help him, because there's a lot of people out there who know what the media says about Trump, but when they're looking at this, they're seeing a professional figure. So I think that does help Trump in the polls. It is 6:18. He told me that 6:20 he would hop in here. So almost time. Did anybody go to a debate watch party? I was actually watching that on Thursday night. I went to the Trump campaign office in the local city near me, and they made a big thing about it. They invited tons of people there. They had huge pizza at least double, maybe triple the size of a normal pizza. The slice went the length of 2 plates, and they cut it skinny because that's a lot of pizza. So paper plates with these comically long slices of pizza is what we had, as a whole room full of people watching the debate. And it was funny. They had an English speaking room, and then the next room over they had a second TV set up with that language set to Spanish. They had all the Spanish people in there, and we were going back and forth, trading food, trading jokes. It was a fun time. Yeah, Hispanics for Trump. There were a lot of Spanish people in the Trump campaign office watching that debate with us. Just eating pizza, partying together. Yeah. It's kind of fun the watching the screen right now, watching my Rumble stream, like Streamception, because I have the stream set to view this Rumble channel, and as the delay goes, like when I'm talking, there's like, well, now I can tell there's exactly a 3-minute delay because I see 1026 and the next screen is 726, and then the next screen is like 425. So there's a 3-minute delay between me talking and you hearing it. So that's fun to know that exact amount of time now. Because usually when I start streaming, I sit with Rumble open on my phone and headphones in, like just talking and listening, waiting for that Rumble audio to come in my earbuds. Let's check if the YouTube stream actually started. Okay, I told the stream to start. Do I have to refresh the page? Do I have to go back to my channel and go into it that way? Live. It still says upcoming. Why is my streaming software doing this? What about Odyssey? I don't even know what this website is doing. Oh, okay. Having trouble starting a stream. Try a reset. Let's open this in a new tab. Troubleshooting live on stream. How's that? How do you like that, viewers? Oh, wow, okay. I don't even know what this website is doing. Well, let's mute this. Yeah, Odyssey. We are live on Odyssey. Hooray. 2 for 3. So now I know it's a YouTube problem and not a problem with my streaming software, because I set it up the same way on both of those websites. Let me check my email to see if he gave any updates. I do not see any more emails from him. Now I'm curious, because we talked about the debate. I'm curious to check on polls right now. Latest polls. Polls from Friday. Polls from Thursday. So Thursday, general election, Trump 48, Biden 44, and then the same day with all the others added in, Kennedy, West, Stein, Trump is at 40, Biden's at 37, so 3.4 point gap. And today it's a 2-point gap, but that doesn't account for the other candidates added in. General election, oh, those are different polling firms too. Morning Consult has Biden up 1, interesting. Rasmussen, Biden job approval, 11 points disapproval. That's fun, that's fun. I'm curious, any direction of country wrong track? Oh, 13% of people think we're going in the right direction. 68% of people think we're going in the wrong direction. That is chef's kiss. That's fun. That's a fun number. Biden disapproval 20. Oh man, these numbers are something. These are special. These are golden. Wow. I don't see Richard in there yet. I wonder when we're going to get more Pennsylvania polling. Wednesday, Wisconsin was a tie, but that was before the debate. Wisconsin, Trump up 3 with all the other candidates added in. Still Wednesday. The Senate race, the Democrat is up 7 points, according to Marquette polling. Tuesday, Trump is up 5 in Georgia. Nevada Senate, looks like the Democrat is up 5. Nevada general election, Trump is up 7. That's really something. And up 3 in this one that doesn't account for the other candidate. Oh, wow. Look at Kennedy's polling in Nevada. That's special.
Hello, hello.
Oh, hello. Let me unmute myself. Hello, how's it going? Can you hear me okay? It looks like you're muted.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay. Yep, just
Very
letting
good.
you know we're live on stream. I tested the audio for the different websites I'm streaming on. I'm on Rumble, Odyssey, and I'm still trying to figure out what's wrong with YouTube. But as long as we're on Rumble, I'm happy with it. So,
Okay,
yeah, what you
glad
can
to be here.
introduce yourself. Yep. Thanks for coming
I'm
on.
Richard Weiss. I'm from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, and I am the Green Party candidate for Attorney General of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So tell me about some of your goals for running for Attorney General. Some of your goals, if you win, what are you going to do?
Well, the difference with the Green Party is that the Green Party is working for the people rather than the corporations. So I am open to your suggestions as to what you think is a good goal or target for the Attorney General's office, but we are against the concept of wage theft, where employers are keeping employees beyond working hours and asking them to come before working hours and not paying for those hours. So that would be one goal of enforcement that the Attorney General's office could focus on. Unlike other Attorney Generals, I would not be afraid to confront the governor, Josh Shapiro, about accepting gifts. That is a problem now, and I think there should be a declaration of where the money came from for those gifts and that they should be returned. Those are just a couple of the examples that we could give. There's 500,000 uncapped fracking wells across Pennsylvania. We need to track down those companies and get them to pay. What other suggestions do you have? What would you like me to do?
Yeah, just thinking about what you said so far, there's a lot of details to be worked out with that stuff. I know that as far as the gifts thing goes, I'm part of a group that on occasion has met with some of our county commissioners, and ahead of those meetings we've talked amongst ourselves and questioned, well, what if we want to just be nice and pay for his dinner? Is that considered a gift? So there's more questions than people would think when we're talking about that stuff. And yeah.
Well, when I was in the federal government, the rule was the $20 rule. They may have increased it since then, but they could take out someone for lunch, and the entire cost of the lunch, including tax, was limited to $20.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah,
So that's why it's a good idea to pass a law that states here's the minimum requirement. You can have these gifts under $20, would be considered de minimis, would not be considered influential, and as long as they're not excessive, that they could be accepted. Something like that.
yeah, it's a topic I haven't spent much time thinking about, so it's fun to think about it now and discuss it. So the
I know you're concerned about voter fraud,
yeah,
so
yep,
definitely, if there is anyone voting a name that is not their own, yes, the Attorney General's office should pursue that. Definitely.
yep, yeah. That's on my list of stuff to talk about. Um,
Hmm.
so first up on the list is microplastics. I already talked a little bit about that before you got here. How
Hmm.
I know a lot of people on the left have been concerned with the amount of plastic waste going into landfills and going into the ocean and affecting the environment in various ways. And on the right, I've seen a lot of apathy until recently, until we've started seeing medical studies about the way that microplastics, once the plastic breaks down, it can get into your blood, cause cancer. So I've seen people on the right more concerned with the personal health aspect of that.
Definitely, it's found in the placenta. It's found basically everywhere. It's in people's lungs. Um, that's something we definitely need to work on. And like I was mentioning in our email exchange, um, there is a field of bioplastics, and basically all the plastics that are made from petroleum could be designed and produced from organic organisms, and those plastics would be biodegradable instead of staying forever in the environment and in our bodies.
Yeah, how much do you know about that process? What materials do they use?
All right. There are, like the plastic bottles, they might be made from some kind of starch, but for more sophisticated plastics, they actually bioengineer bacteria to produce it.
Hmm, that's interesting. That's something I could look up more information about on my off time. That's something I'd like to know more about. That's cool. Science is cool.
Uh, like they are making insulin now from E. coli bacteria. They genetically alter it to produce insulin, and then they harvest the insulin
Hmm,
and purify it.
interesting. That's something I haven't researched a lot about. Um,
So usually what people bring up is that they have not come up with a replacement for every kind of plastic, but there are many already in existence, and there will be more and more until we're able to replace them all. And basically, we need to transition off of fossil fuels entirely, and so we won't need to get any plastics from petroleum in the future.
hmm. I guess my thinking is if they can make so many aluminum soda cans, I don't see why, other than price concerns or logistics concerns of retooling an entire factory, what would be so disastrous about shifting water bottles to be a different type of material.
Yes, and more people are switching to their own bottle, it might be aluminum, and they wash it regularly and refill it rather than just buying the plastics. And someday there'll be dispensers. I mean, they already have for like water fountains. You put your bottle in, it fills.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good transition to my next point is what can average people watching right now do to help this issue at least a little bit? And then after that, the next question will be what would the ideal situation look like? How do we get companies, government bodies, etc., to start transitioning away from plastics?
I think it does help to write to your congressman. If you write to them, they do read those, or they have their staff read them and summarize them, and they'll say, we're getting more and more letters or emails about these bioplastics. They want something done, and you'll hear it. They'll say something about it, and keep pushing. We need more investment into new plastics, and also whenever you can, try to substitute like we were saying, have a metal bottle that you're going to reuse and wash. Um, have a bag, like they're transitioning now in many grocery stores here from the plastic bags, and people are buying a bag that they reuse and take to the store back and forth.
Yeah, I've seen that. I do spend a handful of weekends each year in the Bronx. They're a lot different as far as how they treat plastics than we are here. I think in Pennsylvania, I'm starting to see more of the paper straws, but in the Bronx, definitely, they have rules about fast food places putting utensils in bags. They make the customer ask for it now before they do that. And something else, like you mentioned, the shopping bags, they have bags there that you can buy for just pennies, less than $1. Would you like to buy a bag with this, or would you want to carry your
Mm-hmm.
groceries in your arms? Yeah.
And I think they'll start charging for plastic utensils, and I'm sure they can come up with something that is not plastic that can be used at least once.
Yeah. I've also just fooling around online, looking around. I figured out that on Amazon, when you place orders, there's an option on there. If you go into settings, they have a bunch of different plastic alternatives listed for the type of packaging that they use for your orders by default.
Well, that's a good idea. I hadn't noticed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see more and more things like that. But something that I've only recently become aware of is that a lot of the plastics that we're getting are from car tires. We need to come up with new materials
Hmm.
that do not create these microplastics that we breathe in and don't go away.
That's yeah. I never knew that. Wow.
Yeah, that's something recent. Well, you see, the people who were against electric cars were coming up with arguments saying they'll be even worse because they're heavier and they'll create more of these microplastics. And I really don't think that argument flies, in my opinion. I have an electric car; it's not heavy. It's going to be like any other car, and certainly there's many other advantages for the environment.
Hmm. Yeah. I guess my own thinking on electric cars. I mean, if other people want to have them, that's fine. I've seen people talk about if they're too close to salt water that can damage the battery, if they're in a cold place. I've seen stories about, I forget which city it was, but one of the northern states during winter they had a fleet of public transit electric buses, but it was an extremely cold day and the buses all the batteries wouldn't hold a charge for more than a couple miles. So
Hmm.
there's room for the technology to be improved.
Yeah, I
And
haven't heard of that. Well, my car in the winter, it will go fewer miles, but the reason for that is because I use the heater. So anything you
right.
turn on is going to use electricity. So, yeah, I'll have a little bit shorter range in the winter because I'm using the heater, and it has heated seats and all these comforts. So anything you use in the car is going to draw power.
Yeah. I guess that's one other thing that I hadn't thought of is just with the old style car, I know better where the parts are, what each part does. The engine charges the alternator, and because of that, the
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, stuff like that. But the other thing I was gonna bring up is, oh man, now it slipped my mind. Oh yeah,
Well,
the
before you go,
well, yeah, you go
okay,
first.
go ahead. Well, I was going to say, since you mentioned the parts, the electric car has much fewer parts than the internal combustion engine. So, a lot of times, the resistance that you get from the car companies is because you're not going to be buying as many parts from them. You also don't need oil changes. So, it's definitely, I think, uh, less maintenance than an internal combustion car.
Hmm. Well, yeah, no oil changes would be nice. The other thing I was,
um,
oh
I'm
yeah, you go first.
I'm still going to rotate the tires, so it's like going for an
Yeah,
oil change. I suppose.
yeah,
I think of the car, it's almost like driving a smartphone. I mean, how many parts do you change on a smartphone?
yeah. My parents do have one, and they've had. over the years, they've had it for probably 10 years at this point. Just a handful of
Wow.
issues sometimes with the computer part of it, but as with any car, old style cars have their issues as well. So I wouldn't say
There's
it's better or
certainly
worse in terms of maintenance that I've seen them do.
there's certainly improvements every year, and I think it's
Yeah,
greatly improved now.
yeah. And I guess the other thing I wanted to bring up, if we're talking about electric cars, the the limitation there is if we're charging it from electric, then we're only cutting out as much fossil fuel as it depends on where your electric is supplied locally, what kind of where how that energy is produced, the source of the energy.
Well, I took a deal from electric company called Inspire Energy, and I think they're from out west somewhere, but they're telling me it's 100% renewable.
Hmm.
So it's all made from wind and solar, I think. I don't know if they have any water power. Um, I still have to pay the West Penn Power for the use of the power lines, but the electric portion is all renewable energy, and I charge my car at home.
Hmm. I know there's a nuclear power plant near me. I think most almost all of my local area is supplied by that.
There's one not too far from here. There was another company claiming they had renewable energy, but when I looked at their details, they included nuclear, and so I changed that one. I went with this Inspire Energy, and they gave me a deal. It was a pretty good deal. I thought. I think it's less than what I was paying before.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. What are your thoughts on nuclear as opposed to wind and solar?
I'm personally opposed to nuclear. I know I have friends who like nuclear, but basically, nuclear takes much longer to implement. It almost always goes over budget. It's way too expensive. They claim it's cheaper, but if you look at the actual plants being built, they're always uh, overdue, past budget, and over budget, and take sometimes decades longer than planned. We can put up solar cells and windmills immediately. I think we should as fast as possible.
Hmm. I guess I do think solar needs more improvement in the technology, but I'm a big fan of hydro, actually.
Oh, sure. I don't think anybody's against that. Definitely.
Yeah.
And then they have wave power. If you're near the ocean,
I have seen
they
that.
can.
Yeah, those are
Yeah.
super cool. There's
Hmm.
what I know of it. It's a platform that goes up and down with the waves, and the motion generates the electric. Those are a
Yes.
really cool concept.
The waves and the tides.
Yeah.
Yes. And all you need is some motion. If you have some motion, you can generate power.
Yeah. I know one very valid reason that some people oppose nuclear is eventually the material needs to get stored somewhere for hundreds, maybe thousands of years and wait for it to.
Definitely.
Huh?
We don't really have enough or any safe place to put the waste.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Also, there's not really any place that we know is completely safe from either some kind of natural disaster or a war. So there's three nuclear reactors right now in Japan, in Fukushima, Japan. They're still uncontained. You don't hear about it in the news because they don't. There's nothing they can do about it, so they figure they don't want to talk about it.
Right,
We,
yeah.
we don't have the technology to contain them. They have to develop new technology. So they're still sitting there uncontained. And then even if you find some geologically stable area that you think is safe from natural disasters, you can always have a war, like in Ukraine, and they're always talking about they're worried about the nuclear reactor in Ukraine.
Yeah. I forget the name of it. It's a really popular disaster, like a well-known disaster, I should say. The
in
one in
Russia.
Ukraine that, yeah, Russia or Ukraine that melted
Yeah.
down. The one with the
Now you
elephant's
said
foot.
you forgot. I forget too. So
Yeah.
I have a computer in front of me. I can start searching.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen people try to do studies on the local wildlife there, the effect on the animals after multiple generations of being so close to that.
I'm sorry, I was typing as Chernobyl.
That's the
You
one.
should
Yep.
remember that. Yeah, yeah, that was a real problem, and the workers in that one I read, they couldn't stand being in the area more than, I don't know, something like 1 hour, or they would get too much radiation. So they were literally having people, like hundreds of thousands of people, standing to work for 1 hour.
Wow.
And they would go in and work for 1 hour, and they basically buried it and poured and cement, encased it in cement. But I mean, that's not a good option.
Yeah, that's that's gonna be there for a long time.
Yeah, it's just it's still there, and that could also leak into the environment. I don't know what they're doing. In Japan, it's really not a stable situation. They have basically frozen. They're spending a lot of money to put these encase the entire area around each of these reactors in ice
Huh.
because this is near the water, and they don't want it going directly into the water. Even though they have been dumping a lot of the water that they've been using for cooling, they've dumped it into the ocean.
I haven't heard
They
about
claim,
that ice project. That's wild.
yeah, I mean, these were supposed to generate electricity. Now they're using a lot of electricity to keep it from leaking into the ocean.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, I'm against nuclear. I've had one person say they like fusion, um, and it's not really commercially feasible yet. I also think it's very expensive. Um, what will work in the near term is the wind power and the solar and the hydro. Um, Maybe someday in the future, the fusion is how we're going to power spacecraft. I don't think it'll stop. People will keep researching and developing fusion, but I don't think that's any near-term solution.
Hmm. One thing we emailed briefly about is I mentioned the thing that I brought up in the my film review video of Princess Mononoke about the pre-axial and the post-axial ways of thinking about sustainability. Have you had a chance to
Maybe
look at that?
I'm sorry I didn't. I did read your review of the book on uh, gun regulation.
Oh yeah.
And not read. I watched it, but you're going to have to do a little review of pre-axial and post-axial for me.
Yeah, so it might take a while to explain. We could skip to the next topic, or if you're interested in this, I could explain it.
Well, if you like it, yeah, fine. We can talk about it.
Well, I guess the basic idea is, uh, the axial age, the time in human history where we had Confucius, we had Buddha, we had Jesus, we had Muhammad, and we had the Greek philosophers. The time where we had all these thinkers in lots of different parts of the world, sort of revolutionizing the way that humans thought about religion and philosophy. And meanwhile, before each culture was touched by that, most of them, and some of them still do, have a different way of looking at nature, like animism, if you're familiar with that term, like caveman
Mm-hmm.
religions. It shouldn't really be called caveman religions because we still have Shintoism today. They still view it sort of like that, like the trees have spirits, the animals have spirits, like not just abstract spirits, but like sort of demigod spirit things that can actually
Mm-hmm.
influence the physical world.
Yeah, in Disney Pocahontas, she talks to the tree. Yeah. Okay.
So what I got at in that video was, even though we don't put it in religious terms when we talk about politics, how the American right wing and the American left wing talk about the environment, I see aspects of pre-axial thinking in the American left wing where they view it as nature is dangerous, nature can harm us if we don't appease it, if we don't keep the balance. And meanwhile, on the right wing, if you look at the book of Genesis, there's this idea that God gave us the earth to be stewards over. It's our responsibility to take care of it, but also it's ours to look after, it's ours to decide what to do with it. He gave us the animals and had human beings make names for all the animals. And if I'm not sounding too confusing, do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, more or less.
So
There's a couple different ways to, probably several, many different ways to view nature.
yeah,
Um, well, you see, when we're in the situation where we have a lot of resources, so many resources we can't possibly use it all, it doesn't matter so much. The problem is we're reaching the point where we can harm the entire planet at once. So we have to, in my opinion, I don't know how this fits into pre-axial, post-axial, but we do have to become more like nature. In nature, there's no waste. What is waste for one system becomes the input for the next system, and you have a cycle. With us, what we've been doing is we've been using stuff up and throwing it away. And that's not going to work forever. We're going to run out of stuff, and all we're going to have is left is waste. We have to start, one word is recycling, but another term is close the cycle. So everything that's used gets broken down into components that can be reused and become inputs to be reused and become useful again. So that way we have no waste.
closing the cycle is an interesting way to think about that.
Definitely, and that is the way nature works. And so if we're going to just use fossil fuels, they are going to run out eventually. So it's something that is only short term, and we've discovered that it's harming the climate. You can see it today that things are getting warmer. We're getting both greater heat and more precipitation and flooding at the same time. And I don't know your position on this, but it's the CO2 and other greenhouse gases like methane that are being released from the Arctic right now. And really, we can't keep using those. There is more than enough energy coming from the sun every day to power the entire planet. We couldn't even use it all if we tried at the current technology. So I suggest we use it.
And that ties into one of the other examples that I gave of the pre-axial, post-axial. If someone on the left wing hears the word sustainability, they're more likely to think about renewable energy and about carbon output. And if someone on the right wing hears that, they're more likely to imagine the logistics of a tree farm, making sure there's always enough new trees planted, that the trees you cut down this year are going to be replaced, and the new trees are going to grow in time, that we don't ever have a shortage of that.
Yes, they do that for paper, trees for paper, so that we don't ever run out of paper. They do sustainably manage tree farms. We need a lot more trees, I think, to help cool the planet. Every tree, the shade helps to cool the planet.
Yeah, and I guess I brought up these different ways of thinking because I think it underlines a lot of what we're seeing with the farm protests in the Netherlands and in other places around the world.
I have some conservative friends and Trump supporters like yourself. Um, I they see the oppression of the small farmer as some kind of really uh, I don't know what to call it. I happen to agree they are being oppressed, and there are elements that take advantage of crises to take advantage of other people. I'm in favor of small farming. I think there should be family farms. Um, so what's happening is they're basically driving the small farmers out of business, and they're going to be bought up by other larger companies that are either big ag or they're going to use the land for some other development purpose. But it's going to be, um, you know, huge mega corporations are going to be the ones controlling it. I would support the farmers.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of what I hear people speculating that land will eventually go to is new housing.
Possibly.
So we would be cutting off our food supply in order to house more people.
We have more than enough housing for all the people right now. What they want is expensive housing that they can make a large amount of money from.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
another
we're going to
aspect
run
of
out
it.
of rich people. There's going to be too many, luxury homes. There's going to not be enough rich people to buy them.
Yeah, and something else interesting. A lot of people don't know this, but the Netherlands, I heard, is the number two food producer in the world.
I don't know about that. That doesn't sound likely. I mean, I would look it up. I mean,
And
there's
it's,
definitely a lot of food produced in the U.S., in
yeah,
China, in Ukraine, in Russia. Uh, so I don't know who's the largest food producer.
yeah, I heard this from a couple different places about the Netherlands, and I've heard bits and pieces of how they set up their farms to produce so much food from such a small land area, and that's something
Hmm.
interesting to look into.
I have seen where they can pack in, acres and acres worth of production into a really small space, and they do something called vertical farming. They're
Yeah,
actually like panels, like walls with plants growing on them, and they can. I definitely think it's possible to produce more food in the smaller area. And we're going to have to because there's going to be so many natural disasters that the usual places where food is produced are not going to be able to produce food anymore.
yeah. Well, I guess on to the next topic if you're ready.
Okay.
Yeah, next topic I have is the voter roll thing that we were emailing about and that I talked about on the Wednesday stream about Eagle AI and voters registering in two places at once.
I look up an article on that Eagle AI and they said they pronounced it Eagle Eye.
Okay.
I don't know if that's true, but that's what I read.
Yeah, so I guess the idea is this is an AI system that can go through the voter rolls and pick out duplicate where the same person registered in this state and another state or this county and another county. And what a lot of right wing people are doing on the ground in Pennsylvania is taking that information and bringing it to their county offices and urging the county officials to investigate this to figure out, like, look into it, ensure it's not a false positive. And I think these people need to be there needs to be some action, either determine if it's a false positive or remove them from the rolls before the November election, because there's a lot of voter fraud
Mhm.
going on.
Well, we differ on that opinion. I don't believe there's a lot, but I do believe that people need to have faith in the system. So this brings the system into question, and there's nothing wrong with using that to check the rolls and look into these people and yes, remove especially um, people who've been deceased and you want them off the rolls. It's understandable, but I wouldn't use it like at the last minute to prevent people from voting. Um, I think what happens is that a lot of people who are entitled to vote, they are citizens and they are, um, of the required age, they should be allowed to vote. I think voting should be made easier, is my position, so that basically, if you don't have ID, if you don't have registration, you should be registered and issued ID on the spot at the voting registration and allowed to vote. Now, somebody who wants to investigate them could investigate them, and if they find anyone who is not a U.S. citizen, they can have them prosecuted and get their vote canceled. But I say let them vote first.
Yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense to require ID to vote because almost everyone, I can't think of anyone who wouldn't have either some form of ID or a driver's license.
Well, I read the story about a lady in the South, elderly lady. I don't remember exactly which state, something like Alabama or Mississippi. I forget. But she, was born in the early 1900s and she didn't have a birth certificate. She's lived there all her life, and she goes to the polls and
Huh.
suddenly they turn her away and say she can't vote. She said, I've lived here all my life. Every my neighbors all
Wow.
know me. So no, she shouldn't have been turned away. What we need is a way to identify the people who come to vote. And when I travel, I used to work in Indonesia, so I've come through Singapore, and I've gone to visit Singapore many times, and they're very high tech there. So when I go to visit Singapore, they take a full set of fingerprints and a picture of you. That's everybody who enters Singapore.
Hmm.
Now, we could have people come to the voter station and they same sort of setup. They take your picture, you put your finger on the reader, and it records it, so we know who voted. So I heard you saying there's deceased people still in the rolls. Well, they're not at the Pennsylvania Department of State. They're not necessarily highly funded. So if somebody has passed away, it's not a huge urgency to get that person taken off the roll. What you have to show is that there's somebody actually voting that name, after the person's deceased. So if you have anything showing somebody voted that name, that's something we would track down and try to prosecute. Definitely. But I'm not sure that's happening a lot.
Hmm. I think it is something that people who want to commit fraud are able to look for because I remember during COVID, back when they had the unemployment rules relaxed a lot because so many people were unemployed at that time, I did get unemployment fraud. I had someone else figure out my information and try to claim unemployment in my name. And looking at the voter rolls in Pennsylvania, I see vulnerabilities. I see places where people can figure this stuff out, and if they know who's deceased, they can plug in that name, get a mail in ballot. There's places that people can do that.
Yeah, I agree with making it so that it's possible to find out who is doing that. So, uh, yeah, I'm not sure about the mail-in ballot, but if people show up, if you take their biometric information, their face, their fingerprint, um, and then that person couldn't vote in another location anywhere in the country, um, and then you'd be able to find out who they are. They if you could find out that that was actually they were voting a dead person's name, yeah, they would never be able to vote again because they'd have to come in and show their face and their fingerprint again.
that would be that would be a really funny situation. My fingerprints registered for a dead person. Help.
Well, you're saying that there's people looking it up and putting in the names. You would have to show. Are there any names that have been checked and verified as deceased people who were counted as votes?
I
Because I'm not sure there are. I mean, that does sound like it would be a really big deal if you found them.
I haven't looked at the number myself, but I know somebody I can call for either Chester or Berks County and get the number of people who voted in 22 who were deceased at the time.
Yeah, that would be a big deal. It's like you would have to track down who submitted those votes for people who are already deceased. And that is something I could do as Attorney General. I would definitely pursue that.
Yeah, well, I would appreciate it if you did.
But I'm for relaxing registration. I think it's too difficult now. They want to register people for the draft at birth. We should register them vote at birth. And anybody who walks in, if you don't have ID, well, we're taking your picture and here's an ID right here now. Um, And it would be on the challenger to say, oh, this isn't a U.S. citizen, to show that this is not someone who's eligible to vote. I want to make sure that eligible voters can vote. If someone's just moved from one county to another and they never updated their information, if they're voting in a statewide office or national office, I mean, that's what I would call a curable defect. That, I mean, they just didn't update their information. Let them update their information, and they can vote.
Yeah.
But yeah, if somebody is no longer living in the county and they want to go back and vote in their old county, yeah, they wouldn't be allowed to do that.
I suppose if we did have a really good setup to track these voters, like something like you're talking about, then I wouldn't be opposed in principle to registering people to vote at birth, like you said, the same way as we do for the draft. I guess I just don't trust that the various county offices, there's too many moving parts. Something is likely to go wrong. Things are likely to be missed or misfiled. That would be my concern.
I would say they're underfunded. They're underfunded, and their database is old. They need new equipment, new computers, and better database. Like we're collecting the signatures now to get on the ballot, and they want, you know, one form to be signatures from one county. And it's hard to do because you just meet people and ask them to sign. You have to say, well, which county are you from? Because then you give them another form for that. Because their database is, they can only search by one county. It's really strange. I think that sounds like it's like from the 1980s or something. I don't know. So yeah, they need definitely new equipment. And I was always concerned that people on the right would be kind of freaked out by giving a fingerprint, and they don't want their information and their face stored. And it's like, I used to be concerned about that too, but you know, they've got it. They've got our faces already just from using our smartphones and walking around. There's cameras everywhere. Meta, Facebook is spying on us. Elon Musk and X is spying on us. Everybody's spying on us. It's just like, what are you going to do? You type something in an email, it's a private email, and then you know, ads start popping up related to stuff that was in your private email.
Yep.
It's kind of, well, after a while you get used to it. And like I said, I've gone to Singapore, and to enter the country, you have to put your fingers on the reader and look at the camera, and then they'll let you in. And in Indonesia, the driver's license in Indonesia has your thumbprint on it. So I'm used to it. And then to be a foreign worker in Indonesia, like myself, I have to give fingerprints. I have to go to the police and give them my fingerprints. But just to be a normal Indonesian person, if you want to drive, you have to put a fingerprint on your driver's license.
When in Rome.
So, we could work something out for mail-in ballots that is going to require a fingerprint, and you would at least have one fingerprint, one vote. And it would be hard to get deceased person's fingerprints. I don't know.
Yeah, you mentioned thinking that people on the right were going to be averse to having their fingerprints and biometric data in a government database. Yeah, I think a lot of people will be. I do feel iffy about it myself, but I also know that so many places have it, including the government and a lot of these mega private corporations.
Yeah, I already just gave up because I don't think you can stop it. And so now they have the face recognition on, you know, cameras everywhere. And if police want to search for somebody, they can search whatever the government cameras are, and they'll look for that person's face.
Yeah,
I don't think we can stop that. I think it should be easier to vote. Like we were talking about making it on a Sunday or a holiday for voting. I think there should be a voting month. You have a whole month to go and vote. I think you should be able to vote at the library, at the post office. Make it very easy.
Yeah, I do think a national holiday would be a good idea. I don't know about a whole month, but definitely a national holiday. Just
In
a
the
whole day
future, I
off
think we
work.
should be allowed to vote on our phone. We use our phones to bank for our banking transactions. So why not with voting? You can put your fingerprint on the phone, or it looks at your face and can take your biometric information. And I think we could have running tallies. It's like you have a voting month, and everybody's voting on their phone, and they can change it until the last day, at the last hour.
Huh.
So you would have people like responding in real time to people voting on their phone.
Oh, that would be wild to see the polling in
Yeah,
real time, to see the results
and then
change in real time.
yeah, and it would go up and down every day. Oh, today Trump's winning. Today's Biden winning. Today's
Yeah.
Trump.
Wow.
And until the last hour. And then people could go and use the computer at the library to vote if they don't have a smartphone. Not everybody has a smartphone, but a lot of people do.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, speaking of Trump and Biden, what did you think of the debate?
Well, I have to preface my remarks by saying I don't really like either one of them. But I also felt like Trump said a lot of inaccurate things. I'm trying to be kind. Mistaken things, rather than or incorrect things. But yeah, Trump looked more coherent, so I would say he looked better at the debate. But that doesn't mean I like him as a candidate.
Yeah. I do think he looked a lot more coherent this time than in past debates. I think part of that was up to the way that they set up the debate rules with muting the microphones at certain times.
Oh, I think that was a good idea because earlier Trump would keep talking, and they need to have a cutoff point. And when it's the other person's turn, they have to let them talk.
It was a more professional debate this way. That it was nice to see it that way.
I wouldn't have minded if RFK was there. I think definitely Jill Stein should have been there.
Yeah,
Jill Stein is the Green Party candidate for president, in case anybody doesn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't mind lowering that threshold for the amount of support needed for these third party candidates to get in those debates.
Definitely. Already, Jill Stein has enough of the petitions to get on the ballot in enough states to win the presidency.
Hmm.
If she were to get all of their electoral votes.
Yeah. Even though I'm already voting Trump, I think it would be nice to see more parties in there. Because other countries, I'm looking at European countries, they have each of them a number of different parties, not just two, even though in practice some of them have two that switch back and forth, but they still have. It's not the same mindset as in America. Like, I haven't seen as much use of the phrase throwing away your vote over there when people think about voting for
Yeah,
one of the
it's
lesser
definitely
parties.
more normal. Yeah, it's more normal in other countries to have uh, several different parties. And even if only one Green would make it into Congress, that I think they could make a huge difference.
It would make news headlines, that's for sure.
I think, a lot of people are against continuing the foreign wars. Um, what I think is mobilizing a lot of people right now is the war in Gaza. And unfortunately, both Biden and Trump support continuing that war, whereas, and I think RFK does too. So Jill would have been the only one if there were those four who was actually opposing the war in Gaza, cut off funding, cut off military aid.
Hmm. I think you would know more about this than me. Have there been any places where the Greens or the Libertarians have been really close to getting in the U.S. House? Getting a candidate there?
Well, I don't know for sure. Definitely not about Libertarian. The Greens. We they like to say we only show up for the presidential election. We do have local candidates, and it's still a small number, but there are over 100 elected representatives, but they're not in Congress. These are like, city council, things like that across the country. I think it's coming, and maybe this year, but certainly soon, and especially as environmental disasters, I think, are going to be increasing in coming years. I think that more people will be considering the Greens.
Hmm. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward with that. I'm looking at my list of topics here. I think we covered, going off on tangents, I think we covered almost everything I have written down that we could talk about. Uh, one thing.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of things that we could talk about if you'd like.
One thing
Well,
you.
I'm interested in getting from you ideas of things to prosecute as Attorney General.
Hmm.
So the voter fraud is one thing,
Right.
definitely. Now they have a different category for election fraud. So voter fraud is the individual comes in and is voting more than once, or voting a name is not their own. Um, I think what you're talking about with just mass submitting a bunch of ballots for deceased people, that's election fraud. Definitely. I think there's more types of election fraud going on than there is voter fraud. And that would be related to, we use electronic means to count the votes, and anything electronic can be hacked in some way. So I don't trust the machines to count the votes. So, like we've mentioned before, you would like to have paper ballots. So we do have something on paper that we fill out, but then we scan it and the machine counts. So I would make it so that there's a hand count on camera. So when the ballots enter the polling station, they basically should be on camera the entire time until they're completely counted, and it should be visible on camera, that they're counting and who the votes are for. Even it should be that clear. So you could review and recount just by watching the video. I don't mind to have the machine as something that's done separately and is kind of like a double check. And if there's some kind of big discrepancy, you could have a recount. But I would call the hand count the official count.
Yeah, and in recent years, we've seen local squabbles here and there about where uh, poll observers, poll watchers are allowed to be in certain buildings and certain rooms. It's probably different for every county, every locality. Some counties try to keep them out of certain areas to observe certain parts of the counting. I definitely agree we should have cameras in every room on every part of the process.
Yes, they shouldn't leave view. And there shouldn't be any that suddenly appear from out of view. Um, yeah, there was a big deal made about the observers, and we should clarify that process and make it very clear from the beginning so that we don't have those problems again. Everyone should be able to verify the process. I think there were people who came who were not like on the list that's supposed to be given in advance and things like that. Well, we should get those things worked out so that those things don't happen anymore.
And as far as things to prosecute, you mentioned you were looking for ideas. I know I can get you this info by email if you want. There's a group based
Sure.
in Connecticut called Fight Voter Fraud Inc., and what they do is they have access to the Social Security death records, property ownership records, all these different records, and they have their computer go through it and highlight people that they then investigate, gather public information, publicly available online information to build a legal case of voter fraud against these people that they know for sure have it. So they gather stuff from publicly available property, find your address website, um, social media posts, all sorts of different places that they gather information from, both publicly and privately, and then they refer these people for prosecution. So if you're interested, I can give you that group's website. Uh,
Sure.
yeah, the CEO. It's a 501c. The CEO's name is Linda Sinkowitz. I'll send you that
Hmm.
by email after the stream.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be that'll be fun to see.
Okay. I'm sure we'll come up with more ideas. We can do this on a regular basis if you want.
Yeah. Well,
You
I'm really
send me
glad we're talking
ideas,
about
and
this.
you send me ideas, and I'll put them on the platform. Um, I was going to sue the federal government to drop the charges against Julian Assange, but they preempted me. They made a plea bargain with him.
That was nice to see. He's back home now.
Hmm.
Yep.
Um, the Green Party is not in complete agreement, but the official position is to negotiate peace in Ukraine, and we stop uh, completely funding that war. I think it's a lot of money wasted, a lot of lives wasted.
Yeah, it is a lot of money and lives wasted. I've seen news stories from there, and I mean I don't have a complete understanding of it. I don't live there. There's a lot that I don't know, but what I've seen online is that they're getting desperate with the people that they draft. They lowered the age to 17. They started drafting girls, so they have 17-year-old girls on the battlefield now. Old people. They're running out
Hmm.
of manpower to continue that war.
Yeah, there's videos where they basically kidnap guys off the street, pull up a van and throw them in the van. And there's people, leaving the country to try to avoid getting thrown into this war.
Yeah, that's
But the people in charge, whoever they are at the very tip top, they seem to be really bent on getting into a war with Russia and possibly with China and Iran as well. And I think it's a really bad idea.
that's a sad situation all around. And the thing is, like, the thing that started the war was those two breakaway regions that were officially part of Ukraine, but I don't even know the whole story behind if they voted to secede, if the vote was fair, how many people there actually speak Russian versus Ukrainian or consider themselves one or the other. I don't know enough to say one or the other whether it's fair, whether those regions should break away and join Russia or become independent. I don't speak either language. It's hard to tell. And so many people in America want to just assert their position. Oh, Russia's bigger and they invaded, so they're the bad guy.
Well, they don't really talk about what happened before this latest war. Um, I view it as a border dispute, and it's if we got involved, it would be like another Vietnam. It would just be a waste of money and lives for a border that has no strategic significance to the United States at all. So there's no need to fight about it for the United States. I can understand some Ukrainians might be very passionate about it. Um, so the U.S. tried to um, change the government in Ukraine in 2004. They spent a lot of money, billions of taxpayer money that we could have used for something more useful in the United States or just saved. Um, and they did get their candidate in, but their candidate was voted out. And there was a candidate from the eastern part of Ukraine, that's next to Russia, who became the president. And this was verified as a democratic election. In fact, it was considered exemplary. Then the U.S. funded a coup against that president, and he had to flee the country. And the newer president, there was one before the current one, um, but Zelensky was actually elected to make peace with Russia. That's what people wanted. Now, what do you think would happen if, I don't know, Canada or Mexico, the U.S. funded a coup, or if Russia funded a coup and put in the candidate they like, um, and then started building up the military? There's articles from, I don't know, Foreign Policy magazine or others that immediately the U.S. had CIA training troops in Ukraine after that coup from like 2014, 2015. And so the whole idea was to start a war with Russia. And of course, they're going to invade. So there was a resistance movement in the East. They rejected this new government, and it was basically not an all-consuming civil war, but it was a civil war, and the people in the East were getting pounded, including civilians, by artillery. And that's when Russia attacked, when they stepped up their artillery shelling of the civilians in the East. I think it's very understandable, but I don't know how many people agree with that. Basically, if the U.S. had not interfered in Ukraine, I don't think there'd be any difficulties between Russia and Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine used to be one country. 40 years ago, approximately, that border wasn't even there. So, it could be, with the U.S. coming in and overthrowing the government and putting in one that's oppositional to Russia, and then building up the military that is virulently anti-Russian. I think it's understandable Russia wants that border moved a little bit to the west. And I think if we negotiated a peace at the beginning of the war, it would have been a better deal than what they're going to get now, because they're definitely going to not be able to stand up to Russia alone. And then I don't really feel like sending any Americans over there to die for a border
Definitely.
that has
Yeah.
no strategic importance to the U.S. at all. Who cares? But there are people high up who just really want to attack Russia, and they really want a war with Russia, and they basically want the Russian oil fields is what they want. If we switch to renewable energy, we're going to see a lot fewer wars over oil. I think we're going to see wars over water in the future, but it would be a great help if we reduced our reliance on oil. We'll still need oil for a long time, but not as much as we do now. The military, the fighter jets, the planes, still all run on fossil fuels. I think it'll be a while before we get an electric one. But then, if we switch everything else, all the civilian, including industry, they have steel mills that are electric now. They have machines that will do digging, like Elon Musk's boring machines to make tunnels. They're all electric. All industry and all power generation can be converted to electric. And I think we'll see a lot fewer wars over oil. Maybe still wars over other things.
Yeah, there's a lot of gray area all around when it comes to Ukraine. There's one thing I remember from a month or two ago, a news story about the elections being canceled in Ukraine and Zelensky staying in office past his elected date, and the reason being was impossible to conduct elections and get actual good voter results from the occupied parts of Ukraine. And the initial reaction from a lot of the people that want to just cut aid from Ukraine was, "Oh, look, he's a dictator. We're supporting a dictator. Let's get us out of there." But I I see this as a gray area too, because imagine if another country invaded and occupied California or Texas, and we tried to have an election with whatever voter results we're able to get or not able to get from those places. Would anyone call that fair if we did that?
Yeah, that's definitely difficult in the case of the U.S. And like I was saying with Ukraine and Russia, that was one country not very long ago.
Yeah.
So the people in those eastern districts, they speak Russian, and actually probably a majority of people in Ukraine spoke Russian before the war. Then they started enforcing use of Ukrainian. Even Zelensky, um, at home, the language they used at home between each other was Russian, not Ukrainian.
Oh wow.
And this was extremely common. Um, yeah, they can't have an election because they would lose. I'm sure the majority would now vote to stop the war. Um, he also banned opposition parties. So I don't think you can call that a democracy anymore if there's no elections and the opposition is banned.
Yeah. Well, that is a tough
So that's
situation all around.
and the bottom line is I wouldn't send one American to go die for that border. It's not worth it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, this was a great conversation. We covered a lot of topics. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more topics. So you keep them coming.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Well, I'll see you later.
Okay, take it easy. Talk to you next time.
Yep, you too.